Welcome back to the Sports Source and our discussion of name, image, likeness. This segment brought to you by Daniel Hood Roofing. We're talking about former players who can have a role in the community. It's a great example. Daniel Hood played at UT, gave his heart and soul over there. He's now got a great business here in town in terms of putting roofs on people's homes, and got 2 more calls this week from people who were thrilled with the work that Daniel and his team did on their home. Let me tell you, if you are in the market for a new roof, if you need roof repairs, or you need new guttering, Daniel Hood Roofing is the place. DanielHoodRoofing.com is the place to visit. Daniel Hood is the guy to call. Daniel Hood Roofing. Okay, I want to quickly run through some winners and losers of the NIL game. Players, winners if they get the money they're promised, right?
Correct.
Winner.
Short-term winner.
Make
Short-term winner.
10-year decisions, not 1-year decisions. But yes,
But when you're 18,
I know. But again,
I was
hopefully you
making
learn from the
5-minute
lessons of the past.
decisions.
But no money to some
Now
money.
you're trying to get a date for the next night. You're not thinking about 10 years down.
Yeah, exactly. Coaches, winners or losers? No, they're losers. aren't
biggest
they?
losers by
Biggest
far.
loser of all.
Fans, Chuck, super fan Chuck down there.
The super fan
Are
Chuck.
fans winners or losers in this?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on how your favorite school or coach devotes their resources and recruits people and companies to make this work.
Yeah, if you're a business owner, stop complaining about it. Get up, write the check.
Well, it was funny. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who was talking about the fact that the people were beating up Danny White. He's just not doing anything for NIL. Why are we behind in NIL? Danny White sucks. And I'm sitting there thinking, stroke a check. Write a check. Yeah. Come on, big mouth. what are you talking about, Danny
also,
White?
like,
you can write a check. Go find somebody.
Tennessee's
get a player.
doing fine in the NIL game. There's this idea that they're like so far behind. Like ultimately, you got to have star players, and this is the first full off season. They got one in Hendon Hooker, and maybe a second in Cedric Tillman.
But they didn't know he was a star player at the time.
Exactly, but the thing, right
it would've
now
been
you
Milton
do.
last
You're
year.
going into the first full off season. That will tell you kind of what you can sort of do. He doesn't have the same sort of name recognition like a Fulkerson does, but ultimately,
Small schools, I would say they're losers because they're now a farm system.
it's tough.
ETSU just had a lineman that transferred to LSU. It makes me wonder about guys like, 20 years ago, Randy Moss and Chad Pennington were at Marshall. Is there any chance in the world those guys finish at Marshall in this situation?
Or what about Jackson State?
Oh, well,
You know,
That's sort of an outlier.
That's its own thing. But
yeah,
for the most
it's
part,
tough.
that's the exception.
I
I'm going by the
understand.
rule, not the exception rule. I would also say this. Look at Hawaii's new coach, Timmy Chang. Led them to a Sugar Bowl. It's the best season in Hawaii history. Does that happen if he's having his career down there, or does Georgia come in and say, hey, or Tennessee, hey, we could use you for a year. Get out of Hawaii. We'll put you in the NFL. I think smaller schools, you're now even smaller down the food chain. You're literally part of the food chain. Your roster will be gobbled up.
It's tough. I mean, coaches are fielding calls from bigger programs. Well,
Players.
coaches aren't. Players are
Players
fielding
are.
calls from bigger programs because right now, I was down in San Antonio for the coaches convention, and they had NCAA reps in coaches meetings, basically saying, "We'll take your complaints on the tampering stuff, but like, they, sort of sending the message." Nothing coming. Like, we'll maybe take your complaints and maybe eventually it'll happen, but like nothing's coming. The tampering stuff right now, people are getting away with
And
it.
there have been coaches who've suggested that they've got players who aren't in the transfer portal who are fielding calls from bigger
100%.
schools.
I'd have one other potential loser as in the University of Athletic Departments because of, one, the reworking of staffing, but then two, if I was going to directly donate to a university, why would I do that anymore? Why would I not just give it to player
I
X?
mentioned
and
that.
So from
Great
a
point,
funding standpoint, how are departments going to handle that?
Or how about you want a luxury suite? Well, guess what? Instead of $1 million or whatever, it's 1.5.
But me as a,
And the
as a
five goes to
donor,
players.
me as a donor, I'd rather go directly to
To the
my
player.
Yeah.
that I can then tell my buddies, be like, hey, I'm giving so and so this, and I've got actual skin in the game as far as impacting wins and losses, versus just giving the money to Danny White and letting them
This
do
goes
what
to
they do with concessions. So I
Right,
think the
yeah.
university piece is another thing that will end up being a loser.
How long before we see, here's a nightmare scenario, and I was thinking about this before the playoffs. How long before we see somebody hold out who's like, Coach, I don't think I can play in this semifinal game unless I get a better NIL deal.
Well, I've heard
I think
players.
you'll get that at some point. People are greedy scumbags.
I don't know, maybe. If you're that far down the chute, you
$100
gotta.
that happens.
I'll give it to you. I'll hold out on
that happens
NIL.
at
We'll
some
do
point.
it.
You watch.
I've heard players' parents already ask for the money up front
Yeah.
and not willing to wait.
I'll take that 100
Willing-
right
Now
now.
I'm talking about the scenario you're talking about, sitting in the semifinal waiting
yeah.
to play. I don't think that's going to happen. They're too
But
close to doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you're going to have, there's going to be, the thing you keep hearing from coaches is now you have another thing you have to assess in recruiting.
Oh.
Because if you're talking to a kid or you're talking to his parents and all they want to talk about is NIL or going to the NFL, you have to understand if you're a year or two and it's not he's on every billboard in town and doing everything, there's going to be people that whether he wants to or not are going to be pulling him other places.
Vince, and one thing, this is more of a pro thing, but you hear a lot of pro teams that the coach, one of the GM, the one thing he looks for is, does this guy eat, breathe, sleep football? Mm-hmm. Is he motivated by money or by love of the game? Mm-hmm. And you've got guys who, well, Matt Corral could have easily stayed out of the Sugar Bowl. Instead, he said, I'm playing. Got hurt. It's not a serious injury, thank God. But that's a guy who made it clear, I'm about football. But boy, if you're recruiting somebody now and they're talking only about the money, if you're a coach, what do you know about this player's motivation? If it's all about money up front, aren't you worried that this kid may be the laziest?
Or he's
jacket?
gone at the next higher check.
Yeah,
Right.
that's where you
the
have to
biggest-
do that's where you're gonna have to do this dance of you can't ignore it and you can't just lack
Jump
it.
in, Vince. I've been pointing at you for an hour. Go.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where the stress on the coaches is on another level. Because now, not only do you have to decipher which 4-star or whatever that you want to bring in that fits your system, now you have to be able to get into their character and their motivation when you don't have any extra time to figure that out ahead of time. And what about the family? Is the family talking about that stuff more so than how you're going to take care of my kid? Then you have to be worried about those outside influences on that kid as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, Tennessee's had some kids that came down here, and all of a sudden their father quit his job and moved into town with him, and it's like, how big of a, if those guys are pains before NIL,
Right.
what's it going to be when there's actually a monthly check that's supposed to be coming in?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to throw out a name because I don't want to get sued, but anyway. All right, I'll tell you what. Mark, thanks, bud. Good job today. Appreciate it. And you were a witness here, so he'll be paying me $100 at some point. When we come back, let's talk about Tennessee football. Could the NCAA's new constitution really be a boon for Tennessee in getting them off the hook with the NCAA? We'll discuss. Come on back.